Hello my dear friends, how are you all? I am Nupur. Welcome to my channel. So we were just continuing Out of Africa, the story which has become a famous and very dear movie to me. So in the last part, that means part 1, we have seen that Karen had a farm at the foot of Nagang Hills. She has given us a lucid description of coffee plantation. Today we will know about Nairobi town from the description of Karen, about the lifestyle of the people there as Karen had seen and described to us. Hope you will be liking it. If you like, please just comment, share, and also subscribe the channel. I would be very happy and encouraged to continue further. I was pleased to think that this was the only hill up on their way, for the farm was 1,000 feet higher than the town of Nairobi. In the evening, I walked out to meet the procession that came back, the tired oxen hanging their heads in front of the empty wagons, with a tired little Toto leading them, and the weary drivers trailing their whips in the dust of the road. Now we had done what we could do. The coffee would be on the sea in a day or two, and we could only hope for good luck at the big auction sales in London. I had 6,000 acres of land and had thus got much spare land besides the coffee plantation. Part of the farm was native forest, and about 1,000 acres were squatters' land, what they call their shambas. The squatters are natives who, with their families, hold a few acres on a white man's farm, and in return have to work for him a certain number of days in the year. My squatters, I think, saw the relationship in a different light, for many of them were born on the farm, and their fathers before them, and they very likely regarded me as a sort of superior squatter on their estates. The squatter's land was more intensely alive than the rest of the farm, and was changing with the season the year round. The maize grew up higher than your head as you walked on the narrow, hard-trampled footpaths in between the tall green rustling regiments, and then again it was harvested. The beans ripened in the fields were gathered and threshed by the women, and the stalks and pods were collected and burned, so that in certain seasons thin blue columns of smoke rose here and there all over the farm. The Kikuyu also grew the sweet potatoes that have a vine-like leaf and spread over the ground like a dense entangled mat, and many varieties of big yellow and green speckled pumpkins. Whenever you walk amidst the Kikuyu shambas, the first thing that will catch your eye is the hind part of a little old woman raking in her soil like a picture of an ostrich which buries her head in the sand. Each Kikuyu family had a number of small, round, peaked huts and store huts. The space between the huts was a lively place. The earth hard as concrete, here the maize was ground, and the goats milked, and children and chickens were running. I used to shoot sparfowl in the sweet potato fields round the squatter's house in the blue late afternoons, and the stock pigeons cooed out a loud song in the high-stemmed fringy trees which were left over here and there in the shambas from the forest that had once covered all the farm. I had moreover a couple of 1,000 acres of grassland on the farm. Here the long grass ran and fled like sea waves before the strong wind, and the little Kikuyu haired boys herded their father's cows. In the coal season they carried live coals in small wicker baskets with them from the huts, and sometimes caused big grass fires, which was disastrous to the grazing on the farm. In the years of drought, the zebra and the eland came down to the farm's grass plain. Nairobi was our town, 12 miles away, down on a flat bit of land amongst hills. Here were the government house and the big central offices. From here the country was ruled. It is impossible that a town will not play a part in your life. It does not even make much difference whether you have more good or bad things to say of it. It draws your mind to it by a mental law of gravitation. The luminous haze on the sky above the town at night, which I could see from some places on my farm, set my thoughts going and recalled the big cities of Europe. When I first came to Africa, there were no cars in the country, and we rode into Nairobi or drove in a cart with 6 mules to it and stabled our animals in the stables of the Highland Transport. During all my time, Nairobi was a motley place with some fine new stone buildings and whole quarters of old corrugated iron shops, offices and bungalows laid out with long rows of eucalyptus trees along the bare, dusty streets. The offices of the High Court, the Native Affairs Department and the Veterinary Department were lousily housed, and I had a great respect for those government officials who could get any work at all done in the little burning hot, inky rooms in which they were set. All the same, Nairobi was a town. Here you could buy things, hear news, lunch or dine at the hotels and dance at the club. And it was a live place, in movement like running water and in growth like a young thing. It changed from year to year, and while you were away on a shooting safari, the new government house was built, a stately cool house with a fine ballroom and a pretty garden. Big hotels grew up, great impressive agricultural shows and fine flower shows were held. Our quasi-smart set of the colony from time to time enlivened the town with rows of quick melodrama. Nairobi said to you, "Make the most of me and of time. We are common ni wieder so young, so undisciplined and rapacious Jusaman." Generally, I and Nairobi were in very good understanding, and at one time I drove through the town and thought, there is no world without Nairobi streets. The quarters of the natives and of the colored immigrants were very extensive compared to the European town. The Swahili town on the road to the Mutaiga Club had not a good name in any way, but was a lively, dirty and gaudy place with any hour a number of things going on in it. It was built mostly out of old paraffin tins hammered flat in various states of rust, like the coral rock, the fossilized structure from which the spirit of the advancing civilization was steadily fleeting. The Somali town was farther away from Nairobi on account, I think, of the Somali system of seclusion of their women. There were in my day a few beautiful young Somali women of whom all the town knew the names, who went and lived in the bazaar and led the Nairobi police a great dance. They were intelligent and bewitching people, but the honest Somali women were not seen in the town. The Somali town lay exposed to all winds and was shadeless and dusty. It must have recalled to the Somali their native deserts. Europeans who live for a long time, even for several generations, in the same place cannot reconcile themselves to the complete indifference to the surroundings of their homes of the nomadic races. The Somalis' houses were irregularly strewn on the bare ground and looked as if they had been nailed together with a bushel of 4-inch nails to last for a week. It was a surprising thing when you entered one of them, to find it inside so neat and fresh, scented with Arab incense, with fine carpets and hangings, vessels of brass and silver, and swords with ivory hilts and noble blades. The Somali women themselves had dignified gentle ways and were hospitable and gay with a laughter like silver bells. I was much at home in the Somali village through my Somali servant Farah Aden, who was with me all the time that I was in Africa, and I went to many of their feasts. A big Somali wedding is a magnificent traditional festivity. As a guest of honor, I was taken into the bridal chamber where the walls and the bridal bed were hung with old gently glowing weavings and embroideries, and the dark-eyed young bride herself was stiff like a marshal's baton with heavy silks, gold and amber. The Somali were cattle dealers and traders all over the country. For the transport of their goods, they kept a number of little grey donkeys in the village, and I have seen camels there as well, haughty, hardened products of the desert beyond all earthly sufferings, like cactus and like the Somali. The Somali bring much trouble upon themselves by their terrible tribal quarrels. In this matter, they feel and reason differently from other people. Farah belonged to the tribe of Habar Unis, so that personally in a quarrel I sided with them. At one time, there was a great real fight in the Somali town between the two tribes of Dulba Hantis and Habar Chaulo, with rifles, shooting and fires, and 10 or 12 people killed until the government interfered. Farah then had a young friend of his own tribe by name of Saeed, who used to come out to see him at the farm, and who was a graceful boy, so that I was sorry when I was told by my houseboys that Saeed had gone round to visit a Habar Chaulo family in their house when an angry member of Hanti's tribe had passed and fired 2 shots at haphazard through the wall of the house and broken Saeed's leg. I condoled with Farah on his friend's misfortune. "What? Saeed?" Farah cried out with vehemence. That was good enough for Saeed. Why must he go and drink tea in the house of a Habar Chaulo? The Indians of Nairobi dominated the big native business quarter of the bazaar, and the great Indian merchants had their little villas just outside the town. Javanji, Suleiman Virji, Aladina Visram, they all had a taste for stonework stairs, balusters and vases, rather badly cut out of the soft stone of the country, like the structures which children build of pink ornamental bricks. They gave tea parties in their gardens with Indian pastry in the style of the villas, and were clever, travelled, highly polite people. But the Indians in Africa are such grasping tradesmen that with them you would never know if you were face to face with a human individual or with the head of a firm. I had been to Suleiman Virji's house, and when one day I saw the flag at half-mast above his big compound of warehouse, I asked Farah, "Is Suleiman Virji dead?" "Half dead," said Farah. "Do they put the flag at half-mast when he is half dead?" I asked. "Suleiman is dead," said Farah. "Virji is alive." Before I took over the management of the farm, I had been keen on shooting and had been out on many safaris. But when I became a farmer, I put away my rifles. The Maasai, the nomadic cattle-warning nation, were neighbors of the farm and lived on the other side of the river. From time to time, some of them would come to my house to complain about a lion that was taking their cows and to ask me to go out and shoot it for them, and I did so if I could. Sometimes on Saturday, I also walked out on the Orangi Plains to shoot a zebra or two as meat for my farm laborers, with a long tail of optimistic young kikuyu after me. I shot birds on the farm, sparfowl and guinea fowl that are very good to eat, but for many years I was not out on any shooting expedition. Still, we often talked on the farm of the safaris that we had been on. Camping places fix themselves in your mind as if you had spent long periods of your life in them. You will remember a curve of your wagon track in the grass of the plain like the features of a friend. Out on the safaris, I had seen a herd of buffalo, 129 of them, come out of the morning mist under a copper sky, one by one, as if the dark and massive iron-like animals with the mighty horizontally swung horns were not approaching but were being created before my eyes and sent out as they were finished. I had seen a herd of elephant traveling through dense native forest where the sunlight is strewn down between the thick creepers in small spots and patches, pacing along as if they had an appointment at the end of the world. It was, in giant size, the border of a very old, infinitely precious Persian carpet, in the dyes of green, yellow, and black-brown. I had time after time watched the progression across the plain of the giraffe in their queer, inimitable vegetative gracefulness, as if it were not a herd of animals but a family of rare, long-stemmed, speckled, gigantic flowers slowly advancing. I had followed two rhinos on their morning promenade when they were sniffing and snorting in the air of the dawn, which is so cold that it hurts in the nose, and looked like two very big angular stones rollicking in the long valley and enjoying life together. I had seen the royal lion before sunrise below a waning moon crossing the grey plain on his way home from the kill, drawing a dark wake in the silvery grass, his face still red up to the ears, or during the midday siesta when he reposed contentedly in the midst of his family on the short grass and in the delicate spring-like shade of the broad acacia trees of his park of Africa. All these things were pleasant to think of when times were dull on the farm, and the big game was out there still in their own country. I could go and look them up once more if I liked. Their nearness gave a shine and play to the atmosphere of the farm. Farah, although with time he came to take a vivid interest in farm affairs, and my old native safari servants lived in hope of other safaris. Out in the wilds, I had learned to beware of abrupt movements. The creatures with which you are dealing, they are shy and watchful. They have a talent for evading you when you least expect it. No domestic animal can be as still as a wild animal. The civilized people have lost the appetite of stillness and must take lessons in silence from the wild before they are accepted by it. The art of moving gently without suddenness is the first to be studied by the hunter, and more so by the hunter with the camera. Hunters cannot have their own way. They must fall in with the wind and the colors and smells of the landscape, and they must make the tempo of the ensemble their own. Sometimes it repeats a movement over and over again, and they must follow up with it. When you have caught the rhythm of Africa, you find that it is the same in all her music. What I learned from the game of the country was useful to me in my dealings with the native people.